So if you want to understand the changes that PRS have made to their S2 lineup for 2024, why these changes are game changers, literally speaking, and the difference between SE, S2 and Core now, and what is my pick of the bunch of this new S2 lineup, this video should help you. So hi everyone, welcome back to the Ministry of Guitar. I am Utkarsh. If you like this channel, please do like, subscribe and share. It really helps. Excuse my disheveled appearance and slightly morning voice. It is literally morning here and I've woken up to this news. I've taken a quick look at all of these changes, which are very exciting. And I'm going to run you through it based, of course, on my experience as an owner of 50 PRS guitars and shockingly no S2s. I own 50 guitars, 50 PRS guitars, and I don't own S2s. And that might just change with the changes that they've made. Okay, so the starting point is, what are the changes that they have made to 2024 for 2024? In my opinion, they have addressed the main weakness that PRS guitars used to have, or rather PRS S2 guitars used to have: the electronics. Both the pickups and the rest of it. Now, the thing with the PRS S2 is that they have a very unique place in the lineup. They are built in the USA, but they're cheaper versions of the normal guitars built in the USA, which is the core guitars. And the reason they are cheaper is they employ slightly cheaper manufacturing processes, slightly cheaper materials, not worse, cheaper. I'm going to talk about this in a second. And cheaper electronics. Cheaper manufacturing process means that they do not have quarter sawn necks. They have scarf joint necks. This makes the amount of material they need to start off with cheaper. Still equally strong, but that's one thing to note. They don't have the beautiful super figured maple. They have slightly less figured maple, and the maple cap and the carve of the body of the S2 compared to a core tends to be less pronounced. That makes it again cheaper to manufacture. And the last thing is the electronics. They don't share it with the core USA, they share it with SE. And the last bit, honestly, has always been the biggest weakness. For me, I am a fan of SE guitars as well. I have several of them. But if I had to point out one place where you could really feel the difference versus an SE, and actually there are many places you can feel the difference between SE and a core, but one place where it is so obvious is really the electronics, because SE pickups, they are very decent. But I'm not a fan, really. I mean, they do the job, they work, don't get me wrong, but the difference between a SE pickup and a core pickup is the difference between a cheap bottle of alcohol that you will have as a student. Like in India, we have something called Old Monk. It's, it's very well loved, but it's definitely cheap and it's definitely a little strong. And then you have a subtle single malt on the other side, say something like a Lafroig. In fact, the more I think about it, the difference between all, I know these are not the same kinds of alcohol, but in spirit, a cheap alcohol, a cheap whiskey, or a cheap rum, or a cheap vodka versus a very expensive whiskey. That is the difference between SE pickups and USA pickups. Both will get you drunk, but one will get you there in a more subtle way as you enjoy it, as you savor it. So that was the biggest weakness with S2, and I'm so glad to say that they have changed it. And they've started putting the USA pickups on it. They're putting the 5815 LTs, which are the best pickups PRS makes in my opinion. And they're also putting the 8515s, which are decent pickups. 5815 LTs is what you usually get in a McCarthy 594 USA core, and 8515 is what you get on a custom 24. So what now is the difference between SE and S2? What had happened is, because they had been making so many improvements on SE, suddenly S2 was starting to feel, excuse me, a little bit irrelevant. They had made the SEs look so much better, all these beautiful tops, beautiful colors, and they were sharing the same electronics as S2, and they were still half the price of S2. So it was starting to feel a little bit forced, honestly. But now that S2 has been upgraded, let me tell you why the difference between an S2 and an SE is very, very significant. I've often said that SE guitars are amazing guitars, especially for the money nothing can compare. If you compare it to an Epiphone or something, they're in a different league altogether. But much like the SE, PRS SE is in a different league to an Epiphone, the PRS S2 is in a very different league to an SE. At the end of the day, the price point that guitars are built to do matter. And I'm not doing this as an advocate for Gibson, because Gibson does a lot of premium marketing tax on the price points of the guitars. I'm just talking about PRS, which is, in my assessment, more of a, this is the guitar we can build for the price point. I'm sure they have a certain margin to make, but they kind of amp up the manufacturing according to the price point. And the difference between a USA guitar and a made in Indonesia SE is still made in, let's just call it made in Maryland, because that's what PRS calls it. And I also liked that term, because it's not really about the country, though of course USA guitars have a premium. It's about the facility. So the made in Maryland PRS, made in Maryland USA PRS versus the made in Indonesia SE. The difference is quite noticeable. This is not to say that SE is not a great instrument, but made in Maryland USA is a quality instrument. It is like the tolerances, how straight the neck is, how the frets are just amazing. So the Maryland PRS is any Maryland PRS. You can pick up a used Maryland PRS from 20 years ago or 30 years ago. 30 years ago would be expensive now, they're vintage. But say 10, 15 years ago, where they're very cheap because they're second-hand guitars, the quality is something very different. So I think it was doing the S2 a lot of disservice to give it SE pickups. But now you have probably the best musician's guitar that you can buy for any price point. Why do I say this? Why is the S2 the best musician's guitar, not the core? The reason I say the S2 is the musician's guitar is it has everything you need to make amazing music and to inspire you, and nothing extra. To be very honest, as much as I do love my core PRSs and my private stocks, there is a lot of an art angle to these guitars. They are pieces of art because they're so beautiful, because they are employing certain techniques to make the colors pop out, to make the shape look good, so on, and the materials that they're using, so on and so forth. All of this is amazing. I think it has a value of its own. I believe in those values, but it has got nothing to do with the guitar as a musical instrument. It's got to do with elevating the guitar as a piece of art, as an object of desire. The S2 does none of that. So if we just take a quick look at the S2 range, you have slightly more flashy guitars, which is the Custom 24 or 2408 or the McCarty 594. And then you have the standards that are less flashy. And then you have, in my opinion, the pick of the range, the standard satins. And the reason I say the standard satins are the pick of the range is the origin of this actually goes back, not just now, it goes back about to 2004, 2005-ish, when PRS were experimenting with satin finishes. They introduced a product that you may have heard of called the Modern Eagle 1, a modern legend. And that had a satin nitro finish. Now, a very different satin technique was then used to find a way to make a cheaper version of a core PRS. This was the same challenge they were facing 20 years ago. Everyone loves PRS guitars, but of course a lot of it is to make it aesthetically beautiful. How do you take out some of the aesthetics, so to speak, and make it amazing? And they introduced something called the Standard Satin series. I actually have two of them. Three of them, actually. What am I saying? I got them all recently. They are just incredible guitars, because what they have is they have a satin nitro finish. These are different from today's S2 standard satin, because this S2 standard satin, as I told you, has a different way of doing the neck. Scarf joint has a less pronounced carve. But the standard satin that I have was basically just like core guitars, except it has a satin finish. That's about it. And of course, they don't have maple top, they have mahogany bodies. So the thing with these satin nitro standards, what you can now get in the S2 range is that because they have such thin finishes, and because they're so bare-boned down to the essence, there's no fancy maple top, there is nothing, no faff about it. It's literally just a piece of mahogany, thin layer of nitro applied, and with the highest quality build quality, the highest quality electronics. it's the best embodiment of a cue car or a cue guitar, where it just looks kind of plain, but it is just as good. It'll blow any guitar out of the water. So that's what I really like about it. I like that kind of a concept. A lot of people criticize PRS as being beautiful and not so much, and then they say they're soulless. Please try a standard satin PRS with the super thin nitro finish. They are amazing. So my pick of the bunch, actually, if I was to be very specific with you, is the standard satin 22. And the reason why I'm telling you the 22 is there are two reasons. The custom 22 in general is an unloved model. It's so unloved that it's been discontinued from the USA line. But it is it is here in the S2 line. And the reason I would go for the standard, not the custom, I've got is the satin nitro, everything I told you. But the reason I would also go for the 22 versus the 24 is, for me, the 22 with the tremolo and 22 frets, yet with all the appointments for custom 24, is perfectly straddling the line between traditional and modern. Custom 24 gets pretty modern. Not to say you can't get a traditional tone out of it, but it's kind of optimized for a bit more modern music. You can get any tone out of any guitar, by the way. You can talk humbucker, single coil. We'll talk about that in a different video. But the custom 22 makes it easier to get, the standard satin 22 makes it easier to get those tones. And it has 5815 LTs. It doesn't have 8515s. And that, for me, is the biggest thing, because 8515s are nice pickups. But 5815 LTs are the best pickups that exist out there. They came out with the McCarty 594 in 2017. And I am yet, though I do like high output pickups as well. So for the bridge pickup, I tend to put something like a Tremonti or a metal usually. But keeping that aside, keeping my very specific taste aside, the 5815 LT, in my opinion, is the best pickup, best humbucker made at any price point. Whether you buy a $15,000 private stock, you'll still get the same thing. You can go and buy a vintage guitar and get a PAF. I don't think it'll be any better than a 5815 LT. I have played some older guitars. I've A-B'd some of them with McCarty 594s. People better than me have A-B'd McCarty 594s. And the 5815 LT has always overperformed. Ask Tim Pierce if you don't believe me. So that's there. So that's why the standard satin 22, it has a trem, so it has the versatility, it has the ergonomics of a custom design, yet it has the 5815 LT, so you can get into more traditional territory. And as I mentioned many times by now, so that you know it, the satin nitro finish mahogany, the body, there's just the basicness of it, but the perfectness of it makes it amazing. Very quick edit. I missed a very important model, and I'm just rethinking my pick for the best S2 lineup, and that's the S2 Custom 2408. Because guess what they have done? They have put in the Paul's guitar pickups, which you get on the core Custom 2408, which originally you only got on the Paul's guitar, and originally you could only get a 24 fret guitar with a trem with those pickups with a very limited run called the Brushstroke 24. Point is, the Paul's guitar pickups are very different from a regular humbucker because they're kind of narrower, and they have electronic system that make it possible to coil split without volume loss. So they're much clearer pickups than regular humbuckers. If you like single coils, if you are very much a single coil guy but you want a humbucker guitar, this is probably for you. If you're more of a traditional player, it's probably for you. They are just a different flavor. They're the perfect thing to have on your lineup as a slightly different flavor versus everything else. So the Custom 2408 with the Paul's pickups and the special switching system, for me, is the second contender for the best product in the S2, the new S2 lineup. So there you go. Very exciting news. So guys, if you can't afford a core PRS, get the S2. You're not going to miss out on much, just the art part, the beauty of it. But there's a beauty in simplicity, and I think the S2 is really doing that. And if you're contemplating between an SE and an S2, it's a very simple answer. Go with what you can afford. If you can afford an S2, go for it. Don't think twice. Don't think, is it worth double of an SE? It is, frankly, I would say. But if you can't afford it, you're not going to miss out on having a great guitar, because SEs are great guitars as well. So there you go. All right, I hope this was helpful. Till next time.